I went the other night to hear Dr. Siddhartha Mukherjee give a talk around he's touring for his new book, The Song of the Cell. And whenever an author that I'm interested in comes around, I try to go to be a good literary citizen and support them and all of that and buy the books. And what's interesting is my relationship to this particular author is kind of an interesting one. I have his books. I have all his books, and I have not read a single one of them. I originally bought The Emperor of All Maladies, which is the Pulitzer Prize-winning book, his first one, and obviously was a massive commercial and critical success. I bought it because that title just I could not get it out of my mind. What an amazing title, The Emperor of All Maladies. And I understand that it he saw it in another work. It came from another work. But to put that as a title and then the subtitle, a biography of cancer, I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a breast cancer survivor. It's been now, I got to do a little tiny bit of math, 23 years. So I don't often think about cancer in my own body that much anymore. I mean, I do when I have my annual tests and that sort of thing, but it's not a daily obsession. But when I saw that title and that book and that idea, I was like, I want to read that book. It sounds fascinating. It sounds interesting. It is, as I have a personal connection to cancer, as most of us do. So I have this book, but I've not read it. And then his other book, the Gene, that's the second one, the New York Times best-selling book, I also have not read it. So, giant TBR piles with this man's books in them. So, I went to the event and I was sitting there with my husband and it was great. And he's fascinating and gave a great talk and all that. And then there was the Q&A portion of the evening in which they had a professor of molecular biology from a local university, UCSB, interviewing him. So asking him questions that had been some of them submitted from the audience. And the very first question was about his writing process, which I was thrilled by because a lot of the rest of the questions were going to be about disease. That's his specialty is the disorder of the cell. So that's where a lot of it went. But I loved that where we started was what is his writing process, because this is a topic that has just amazed me about him ever since I found out who he was. Somebody who is a practicing doctor, meaning they have patients, they run a lab, they run a nonprofit. He's trying to bring a cure to a particular kind of leukemia in India. He's married to a person who is an incredible and prominent artist, so has a rich personal life. They have a child, all these things in this very full life. And he writes these deeply researched, deeply felt, thought out, incredibly intense and dense books. So how? Like, that's always what I want to know, is how. I'm obsessed with the creative process. How does a person do that? What is the actual way in which they do that? So the first question asked of him was, what is your writing process like? And I just so deeply loved his answer that I want to share it here with you. And there was no recording of this event, and you were not allowed to, you were discouraged from using your phones. It was like no pictures, no recordings, turn your phone off. So I don't have the actual words that were in his answer. But his answer was basically this, that structure is everything in a book. And that in his first books, the structure was chronological. They were histories. He started at the beginning of an idea that he was exploring whether it was cancer or genes, and how we discovered them, how we learned about them, how we treat them, how we know about them. It was a progression through time. So chronology made total sense. But when he came to write the Song of the Cell, something that was not working. That structure was not working, and he was feeling blocked. And he landed upon a structure that then cracked open that material for him and allowed him to move forward and write the book. And he described the structure as that he landed on the idea of dividing up the chapters and the sections by kind of cell. And what he means by kind of cell, I'm reading now from the table of contents of the Song of the Cell, are things like the restless cell, the guardian cell, the defending cell, the tolerant cell, the citizen cell, and from earlier in the book, the visible cell, the organized cell. So he uses these incredibly descriptive words to organize the material and to shape it and to give it form. And that shape and form and structure then becomes not, it's not a thing that you use and then toss aside, or a thing that is kind of sort of there, but not prominent. It's baked in. It's what the book is. It's what that shape becomes, what the book is about for the reader. And the prominence of structure for me is becoming more and more clear the more that I coach and the more I see other coaches coach, that helping writers land on the right structure, whether that in fiction is, what is the time frame, what is the POV, who gets a voice, all of those questions, or in memoir, where does this begin and end, where am I standing in time when I write this, all of those questions about structure are so fundamental to what the book ends up being that you can't really separate them out. And I'm becoming more and more convinced that you can't actually write forward unless you know what that structure or shape is going to be. These questions about structure and shape are baked into the blueprints that I teach from, and that I am writing a new one of right now. I have blueprint for a book for fiction, blueprint for a nonfiction book for nonfiction, and I'm working on blueprint for a memoir. And I just have become more and more convinced that it's structure has to come first. It is the cornerstone on which the entire edifice is built. And when I heard Siddhartha Mukherjee voice that in his incredibly beautiful, intellectual, and powerful way that he thinks and speaks, I wanted to stand up and cheer and say to everybody, do you see what he's saying? Do you see what he's saying? For me, it was more powerful than the things he was saying about the cell, which are profound and some of the most deeply human information we can gather, because it's about how we're made. I mean, it's so profound. But for me, how the story is told is as important and as profound as how we're made. It's right up there with it. And I just loved hearing this incredible thinker and scientist make that case and make it so prominently. And I don't know that anybody else in the audience was as excited as I was in that moment, but I wanted to share that with all of you here so that when you're working with your writers, you can be thinking about that and helping them stay in that space where they're figuring out the shape and the structure before they start to write, because it's so important. It matters so much. And go take a look at the table of contents for the Song of the Cell. It is a beautiful table of contents, and I am such a nerd for these things. And when I run across a beautiful one, I am always so excited to share it. So go check that out. I think you will be inspired as well.